My name is Jennifer Beworsi, one of the co-directors of Music for Your Inbox, and today we're going to have another one of our artist chats with visual artist Liz Melchor. She has this awesome description of herself as an artist obsessed with drawing robots, pen plotters, creative coding, messy mistakes, mathematics, mark making, and materials. So I'm going to get Liz invited, and then we'll talk to her about the mail art she created for this month's art release.
Hello.
Hi, Liz.
Okay, does it work?
Perfect. Thanks so much for joining. And I'm going to go like right off the bat and share your piece because I just got to get it out there immediately. So This is the really beautiful piece you created for this month called Call and Response. And we're so grateful that you made it and that we get to talk to you about it. And I thought it might be interesting to start. You use this term that I really love in your visual art, like describing your visual art practice of like mark making.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to talk about that and like what that means to your practice. And I love, like in particular, you're not talking necessarily about like, I'm a drawer or a painter but like this idea of mark making is like a broader, like range of possibilities. Oh, we're getting Liz back on the call.
Okay, I'm back.
Perfect.
I'm back, but I heard the question. I think I heard the question. So mark making, yes. Okay, I love that. Yeah, that actually is a term I use a lot, and I think it is very much influenced from how I learned to draw. So I learned to draw in a very sort of like untraditional class. It was by accident that I ended up in this class, and it was probably like 10 years ago. I was in San Francisco. That's where I lived for 14 years. That's where I'm from. And I was like bored one night, and there was a figure drawing class like next to my house. And my friend and I were like, oh, we'll go pop in for the night. Like, it'll be fun, draw naked people. It'll be like a new experience, you know? And it was supposed to be like this one night thing. And I went in there, and the teacher was very sort of almost like difficult but like super interesting. Mm-hmm. And I went in, and he came up to us and he goes, sit down, do not look at your page, and draw the model. And so we went and we sat there, and I'm looking around like, what does he mean, right? And it's like everybody's there just like looking at the model and not looking at what they're drawing at all. And for 3 hours, this is how we drew. This was not like a blind, this wasn't like the blind contour exercise that I think a lot of drawers do, where you like draw for 5 minutes and then you look at what you drew without looking. So anyways, I was sort of obsessed with this class and this man because I was like, this man has something like to teach me really about creative process. But the funny thing is, at that point in my life, I was really interested in writing. So I actually this is like really weird and absurd, but I stayed in drawing class to learn to write because I actually thought it was a lot about like process and sort of like all the ideas that get in your way. But that class was really about, for 11 weeks at a time, 3 hours a week, we would draw without looking at our page. So it was about sort of learning to see, and it was about the physicality of mark making. And it was also about sort of, a huge part was about was really being engaged in the process and detaching from the final product. Cause like, if you don't look at the page for if you don't look at the page for hours at a time, like you make messes. Like we weren't making beautiful art. We were like practicing making marks, play, and you're free because I can play and I can do whatever I want because I'm not going to see how ugly it is. Right. And so it was about like practicing that. And so that is like sort of what I became interested in. Like what are all the different things that I can do? Like there is a physicality, and now I draw with robots. So it's like, okay, the physicality is gone in the sense that like my arm is not in it. But like I'm still sort of interested in the range of possibilities and like the range of marks and like what sort of, I don't know. And another major thing that like my teacher, his name was Markowitz. He's so cool. Another thing that he was really into was there wasn't like good art and bad art. Like he didn't believe in sort of telling like certain, like this is really good, like this is really bad. Like I never heard him say that, but he would say he was all about the honest mark. This was his term. And I like this term because it's really hard to evaluate art, right? But his term, honest mark, was like, there wasn't like a set rule of like what an honest mark looked like. It was more a mark that came out of a certain psychological state. And so it was like a trace of the state, right? Like an authentic state. Does that make sense? And so there wasn't like a physical description of it, but the whole room, if you were looking at different marks and stuff, the whole room usually could build like a consensus on what an honest mark, like on the honest mark on the wall, you know? And like to this day, when I evaluate like work visually, like I'm always like, oh, those are honest marks. And it sort of like goes, it's beyond taste too, which is interesting. Like it might be something that's like not my taste. Like I don't find it necessarily beautiful or whatever, but I can see sort of the authenticity and the honesty. I don't know. It's also like hard to explain, but anyways, so all of that stuff is like really why, like, I guess some of the reasons that mark making is just so interesting to me, important to me, something I focus on, something that's in my vocabulary, because it was something I learned from him, my teacher, and from, you know, making lots of marks, and why I'm interested in drawing with robots, right? Like, and I think it's funny because people get mad that I draw with robots.
I was going to bring that up. Like, so that's a big part of, like, I think a lot of artists who engage with technology that replaces their arm or their hand in some way that is perceived, there is like this weird reaction, or not weird, but there's a reaction that people have.
There's a reaction.
Like a lot of criticism and actually it makes me think about this idea of like I'm curious, and I wanted to ask you about like what it's like to kind of, what your thoughts are on that criticism. I've seen some of your thoughts and they're really amazing. Also maybe how that like integrates with your idea of this honest mark, like, you know, does that play into the reaction you're feeling from people or something like that?
So I think there's like this shorthand, like often reaction, especially if I have a reel that kind of like goes viral or in some way, and then people find me that don't necessarily like know about robot drawing or whatever, you know, like just random people finding me. And it's like, they're just like, there's sort of this immediate reaction, which is like, you're outsourcing art to the machine. And I also see this, especially like with like the rise of like AI art, which I find is a very different thing than what I'm doing. And I'm not doing anything with AI, but it's just like this like big, I feel like there's a cultural fear that machines are going to take like everything that's human from humans, and that creativity is sort of like the ultimate human quality, right? And that the machines are going to come and get him. So people are just like, oh, like you're not an artist, like that's not your art, right? Like that's a big comment on the viral reel. It's like, oh, no, the machine made it. That's not yours, you know? And I'm like, and sometimes I'm like, when I first was getting these, I was like, oh, come on, guys, I built the machine, and I didn't build all of them, but I did build, like, the one I think that went really viral, I built it. Like, I learned to, like, crimp wires to build it. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. And I was like, come on, and I'm like hand coding it, like watching YouTube videos to learn, whatever. There's a lot of work behind it, but the thing is, like, that also is interesting to me is like, I don't know, I've actually thought so much about mark making, and nobody, and like these shorthand comments, like they don't know. And so, I just, it's like I'm engaging in the machine in a certain way. And another thing that my art teacher was always like talking about is like, you can engage with tools in different ways. Like, and you can engage with anything in like a very functional way. Like a paintbrush, you can paint your wall, right? Like at your house, or like, and like a piece of charcoal, you can use it in just a singular way, or you can really like move it and play with it, smash it. Like there's such a range of different things. And so for me, like a machine adds it's another tool. And in some ways it presents more constraints, I guess. And also a machine produces a mark that a hand cannot produce. And I'm interested in that. Like, I'm interested in like that tension and that contrast. Like, I'm interested in the machineness of the mark. And a machine could never replace a hand mark, especially somebody who like looks at marks and like this honest mark. Like, let's say in some ways, maybe a machine can't make an honest mark, right? Because it doesn't come out of a state. But perhaps my interaction and interference can get it closer to it. Like it can get an honest mark out of it, sort of.
Yeah.
But it's the interference, sort of. And actually, I've never really thought about that. But a machine could never replace a human mark. It's because I have such a reverence for marks, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's something that's so really cool about the way you frame mark making in your practice. I think like if someone's coming to your work and being like, art is drawing, then they can't see like the breadth of tools that can be used to make marks and all kinds of marks, machine marks, hand marks, you know, different mediums. And then I think what you were saying about the way you're interfering with and playing with the machine is I think that is one of the very, very special, and one thing that drew me to your work immediately. I'm going to hold this up again so people can see. So there are clearly like machine marks, like these very straight lines, these, you know, repeated, you know, but this is not, there's been so much play. And I feel like as a viewer, I can like feel your hands and in this play interference. And maybe could you talk about some of the things you did with the way you played with this piece in particular?
Yeah, cool. I love that you use the word play because that's pretty much what I feel like I'm doing. And I don't know, like I have a lot of reverence for play, let's say. But yeah, like so for example, like that, the postcard that you're holding up, it's all of the marks I think were done by a machine. Like I didn't add, sometimes I do add marks with my hand. But I could never repeat, like I have the files somewhere in my computer. I'm also very disorganized, so I couldn't even probably find the files. But like I have the files somewhere in my computer and I could run the scripts I could run everything all over again, but I could never repeat that output. Like, because there's a lot of things. So basically, let's go through all the play in it. Like, first of all, I was just drawing straight lines and I was playing with the different color pens. Like I wanted it to be green and I was like, okay, what happens if I do this? You know, like all these different green pens that I had lying around and seeing how they sort of contrasted with each other. And then I was throwing water on. And it was drawn in layers. And so I was just like layering different things and it was coded in, a coding language called processing, which is like made for the visual, it was designed mainly for the arts. And I used some of the music that is paired with like Viola Yip's music that's paired, to generate like certain values that then generated, I think it was like the space between the lines at some points and how many lines and how many circles and stuff like that. So that was like part of the play too. And then, I do remember I did like erase some lines in the like once it was already coded, I started erasing the middle of circles because while I was playing, the pen messed up, and so the middle of circles like wasn't drawn, and then I liked that, so then I erased the middles of other circles. So in some ways it's like this feedback too, where it's like I create a situation where like error can and will happen. So it's like, you know, I put water on the page, which like sometimes the pens don't like, and then it might, you know, mess up or whatever. And then sometimes those errors I like, and so then I force the error, like for example, the middle of the circle. And then also you can see on there that there's like these lines like coming across that are diagonal. Yeah, those. And those are also error marks. Like when the page warps with the water and stuff, it gets higher, and the pen goes up and down like mechanically. And then the page got high enough, or maybe even the pen got loose. I don't remember. And then that's it going back to its home position, right? And there's multiple layers of that. So it's like, so there's all these things that are sort of unintentional in it, but in some ways I'm like creating the system for it to be unintentional, for the unintentional to arise. And like, maybe I like to use the word like surprise. Like I want surprise, and I'm drawing with a machine. So it's like the machine inherently is like supposed to not be surprising. Right. So like how could I like, you know, interject into that? And so I'm playing, right? And then it's again, like I'm playing, and it's also a process. It's like I see something happen, and then it's like, oh, what happens if it happens again? Like that's always like I'm basically like asking myself that question, like, oh, what happens if I do this? Oh, I want to do this. What happens if I do this? And then I just keep going.
Well, that makes me think of I think something that maybe people don't think of with like machine art sometimes is like an iterative process. Like, you know, you can have a kind of preconceived notion that someone like codes it up and it prints out and they're like, I did it, it's done. There were many iterations in this process. And a lot of what you're describing, these feedback loops, I wonder if you could talk more about like, how does iteration and like, how are you feeling like you're, like the idea of glitch and response and interference in what you're doing.
I think, again, it sort of like goes back to how I learned to draw in my drawing class. And it's so interesting because these lessons, I learned them like 12 years ago or something. And I don't think I learned them though until somehow they like only hit me like 10 years later. Like I heard the words, I understood the ideas, but like I couldn't like enact it. But my drawing teacher was always like, you know, like, I don't know. He was always talking about like, it's this interaction between you and the page, you know? And so it's like you do something and you look and then you have an impulse and then you do something else. And then you just keep going. And it's like, and you kind of like co-create this. Not co-create, but I guess it's with the machine. I think of it as co-creating, but like it's interactive and it's like you're just trying different things. You're trying different things. And then and you can do that if you don't have if I don't have a destination, which I don't, right? I've never drawn with some like idea in my head of what to draw, or no, maybe I have. And that's not fun for me. Like it's very frustrating because if I have an idea of how I end, the only thing that happens in me is I'm imperfect. Like I'm not getting to my destination exactly how I want. And that's like not a fun internal experience for me. Like I'm more into the play part. So it's like, so it's like when you draw, it's like you do something and you look and then you just feel like, oh, maybe I want to do this. Maybe I want to do this. Maybe I want to do this. And so now I just do that with the machine. And so it's like, I guess it's like this impulse thing, right? Like you look at something and you feel like, oh no, this is bad. This is, you know, awful, or this looks bad, or this needs more dark here, or this needs more, you know what I mean? And then you just react to it and then you keep going until you're done. And I think the risk in this is always like, and I think the thing that you have to work on, or I've had to work on maybe as an artist is like tolerating, like making something really ugly. like tolerating like failure, you know, like, and like, because as you're trying these things, you want to cultivate a sense of freedom, which means risking being really, like making something really ugly. And I've actually found like I'm not perfect at it at all, but like I found that there's like this amazing place when you're drawing, which is like when you're drawing so ugly, you like want to throw up. You're like, you're like, this is awful. Because then you're like totally free, because you're like, anything I do, I could just make it more, like there's no, you can't ruin it. That's the contrasting feeling where you have this drawing and it's like almost perfect, but not quite. And you're like, but I'm going to ruin it. And you get tight. So basically, I don't know if I answered the question, but.
No, well, I think you brought up such interesting things, because there's kind of like, I think it's so helpful in these conversations for people to hear like different modes of working, because you know, you kind of describe two different types of failure, and like for you there's one that's more tolerable than the other, right? Like going in with a specific image and then failing to recreate that image is like an unpleasant, intolerable kind of failure. But there's another kind of but your other kind of failure where you're like free to create something you dislike and be like, oh, I don't like that, is a failure that's like joyful and tolerable and like integral part of the well, I mean, joyful is generous or like, but I can really relate to that feeling of liberation from being like I do a lot of film work, and I remember experience recently where I tried something and I was like, oh, I hate that. And there was a certain level of like delight in being so clear that I didn't like it and that I could try something else.
Yeah.
That was a kind of magic that was really interesting and tolerable and like part of the process. So
yeah.
I love that you described all of that. And you mentioned that this piece is called Call and Response, and it's responding. For people who don't know, this piece of art is paired with a filmed performance by Viola Yip, who has this like feedback dress, where it's this dress laced with unprotected speaker wires that she interferes with the electromagnetic fields of, and it creates this like wild, awesome, chaotic noise that's linked to her gestures in the dress. And Liz created Call and Response in response to like a very early draft of the video and some of the sounds from it. So could you talk about like what you were drawn to or thinking about or anything like that in this idea of responding?
I'm trying to think.
That was a while ago.
No, yeah. No, but in some ways, I think I'm only hesitating for an answer because I don't know if it's so. I don't know if it was so thought out. You know what I'm saying? And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that it was more like I loved being given. I loved being given in some ways an assignment. I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's like here, like you make art in response to. I guess you didn't tell me to do it like that, but that will accompany this music. And so then it's like it presented. So then I used the music in some ways as like giving me a set of constraints. And again, like I don't mean constraints in a bad way. I kind of mean it in a good way. Like I just, the video was green. I mean, there was like green, green in the video. So I was like green. And then I'd never used sound to generate like code. So then that was also for me. I also enjoyed like the machine, like coding and all of this stuff because it's a puzzle for me because I don't really know what I'm doing. Like I have to learn, I'm just learning. And so it was like a new way and for which I could learn because I'm like, okay, I'm responding to music. So like, let's integrate music into it. And I love constraint in creative acts. Like one of the things that I'm a pen plotter, and us pen plotters, because there's quite a few of us, and I think they're like expanding rapidly. Actually, we have and also another reason that I was so excited to do this is because one of the things that the pen plotters do is we exchange postcards. So I'm already really into postcard art, like in general. I love getting art in the mail. My teacher, when I was 13 years old, taught me about mail art, and so mail art has actually always been like in my mind and this thing that I thought was so cool. So anyways, that's a whole separate thing. But yeah, so we exchange postcards and the postcards have the postcards don't have the postcards don't have prompts, but for a week we have a plot week and we have a prompt each day. And I love those weeks when I have time to participate. I love those weeks because I love constraint. Like I love being like, oh, you have to do something within this. So in some ways I took the video and I was like, what constraints can I give myself in my response? And so the Viola's video. Yeah. And then I think those limitations also allow you to explore things that you haven't necessarily explored before because you need to. Yeah. So I like being limited. And I wasn't really limited, but the sound thing was new for me. And that was cool.
Yeah. I wonder how, when you say constraints, I think a lot about like, it creates a certain level of friction in the process. Or something to push against, which reminds me of the way you talked about the pen plotter as a machine that you're like, you're like creating certain kinds of frictions and interactions with. So I think we kind of touched on it a lot, but I want to like give a moment to it. This idea of like, you've mentioned like the perfection of a machine versus like the imperfection of what you're trying to, how you're trying to get surprise, the imperfection of surprise and play. And I wonder if you could talk some about that because I know you've given it a lot of thought.
Yeah. Yeah. So how I draw, like if I draw with my hands, it's very chaotic. Like it's, like it's very like, oh, mess, it's like this. And then I always, oh my gosh, it's so funny. I'll take the bus home from my studio and then I'll go into my house, I'll go in the bathroom and I have like charcoal like all over my nose and stuff. And I'm just like, oh God. But yeah, so it's very messy and I really don't know where I'm going to end up. And that's what I love. Like, I love the surprise part. Like, I love, like, not knowing what's going to happen at the very end of a drawing. And like, so I don't want that taken away from me. And so when I found this pen plotter, and I found it in my own home, that was the thing. Like, it was my husband's, and my husband is, like, in tech. Like, he does tech art, generative art for a long time. Like, this is, like, really his world. And then I just sort of, like, stole his pen plotter and, like, went in my own like direction. But I found this pen plotter and I started to draw with it and I was like, oh my gosh, like it's my opposite. It's my opposite. It's precise. It needs a plan. It's like so neat and tidy. And so, yeah, it was like, and so then that, I guess in some ways that we can link it back to what I was saying before, that then there's a constraint. Like, that there's this constraint of like this perfect little machine. Like, how can I then push against it and create the surprise? Mm-hmm. And so that's in some ways is that I'm just trying to get to the same. I'm trying to use my surprise. I'm using the same motivation as in my hand drawings with the machine, which is like, how do I get to surprise? And it becomes a bigger challenge in some ways because I have to really interfere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really exciting. It's an exciting framework. And I think, I love how it's all connected. I mean, in our whole conversation, you keep like segueing me perfectly to the topics. It's like delightful. Because there is such a like, I think in a way, everything you just described gets back to this idea again of like the criticism that you receive sometimes about like the machine taking away is such a misunderstanding of all of the way it's a tool of constraint to allow you to like more deeply explore some of your impulses or in other directions.
Totally.
And that's really exciting in art making and in mark making.
Totally.
You mentioned the mail art, and I would love to have a few, like, for you to talk a little bit about that. That was completely, so we found your art, because I don't know, more like, being on Instagram and all of that.
Yeah,
and
totally.
So cool, like, and I was so drawn to the way you're using unconventional materials to interfere with the pen plotter. So when I emailed you, the mail art connection was like a total delight. Yeah. I mean, there were so many delightful surprises. Yeah. But can you talk about like what that's been like for you and like the community of it or the experience of it?
Yeah. Well, it's so weird too. So when I was 13, my teacher like told me about mail art and the existence of it. And it's been a whole, and in fact, I can't recount the history here, like accurately probably, but I mean, I think it's a big movement since the 1960s and like a way of democratizing art and collaborating and all of these different things. And it's a really cool thing. And I'm not sure. I've been thinking about this a lot, but I have memories of like going on the Usenet. If anybody knows what the Usenet is, this is like, this is before the World Wide Web, I think. I don't know. And like finding like mail art. I'm pretty sure I did a mail art and like sent it to some stranger and like got something back like when I was 13 years old and like thought it was the coolest thing in the world. Well, now the world has changed a lot. And now we have Instagram and connecting and with people and seeing people's art all the time. Like, I'm seeing people's art when I open the app like all the time. But because the pen plotters have like organized themselves, or there's people that have taken the initiative to organize these exchanges, it's so cool, and it's like, so I send out like a few times a year, I'll send out probably like 16 postcards and I'll receive 16 postcards. And there's it's just with other pen plotters and there's and what I love about the whole program or whatever, it's not really a program, is it's free to participate. You just need to sign up. Like there's no barrier to entry, right? Like you don't have to like somehow be established in any way. Like you could, if you have a pen plotter, I mean, I've even gotten stuff on like laser CNCs. And then I get it in the mail. And I have a studio. I live in Vienna. I'm American, but I live in Vienna, Austria. And, I have a studio in an old high school. This is an old high school, an old Viennese high school. And there's like a desk downstairs where we get our mail. And like, I feel like I'm like the special kid, cause I'm like,
got mail.
I'm always getting like cool postcards, like, you know, like all year because it happens. But there's something about receiving a physical art that is just so different than you can get on and physical art in your mailbox than you experience on Instagram or something like that. Like, I mean, not to knock like the connection on Instagram in any way, but there's something very different about the physicality of it. And then also just, that the little like community emerges, and then people send like, you know, little notes like to each other. And, I just really like that.
Yeah.
And a big thing for me in just other stuff is just inclusion and like everybody being able to participate and so I like also that about these mail art situations.
Yeah. I'm just curious because, you know, I think something that's interesting about mail art and about things being sent, especially postcards in the mail, is like the marks and the damage that happens to them in like transit.
Yeah.
Is that something, are they usually sent like true, like in the mail postcard with, or are they envelopes?
I'm also into like the damage in the mail. That's cool. And actually some of the cooler ones I've received too have had like, you know, marks from the postage machines on them. And then they kind of add, and it like really enhances. And I've definitely sent them traditional postcard style, but then I kind of, it weirdly got just easier to send them in an envelope. So yeah, so my latest ones I sent more in envelopes, but that's like a whole nother additional thing where it's like you can add these. Yeah. And I love that. I love the accident of the surprise of the postal marks and stuff like that. Another thing that would be really cool, and I think they did that back in like when mail art was like more popular, is like you get it, you add something, you send it along. Right. I think they used to do this. And so then it just builds and builds on it. Yeah. It's cool.
Very cool. Well, I'm going to make it a plug now. So if you want to get your own mail,
yes.
this postcard could come to you anywhere in the world. It's got like a lovely note on the back and a QR code so you can see Viola's film that goes with it. And they just really fit so well together, this idea of kind of like improvisation and play and the way gesture and body and movement impacts like the outcome in a and playful and surprising experimental way. So really exciting to see y'all's work together. And thank you so much.
Well, and thanks for this project. It's such a cool project.
Yeah, absolutely.
But were you inspired? Actually, can I ask a question really quickly? Were you inspired by mail art to make what inspired you to make this project actually?
Well, we were founded during the pandemic.
Okay.
Kind of this moment to like radically rethink how you might experience art. And I come from a music background. And so a lot of music was happening on the internet, but it was kind of taking, in my opinion, a lot of, you know, this is not trash talk, but like it was taking some of the worst parts about concerts and like codifying them into streams. Like it would be at a specific time and there were no breaks, so I couldn't go to the bathroom. And like I was also like, but now I was alone and the fidelity was worse.
Yeah.
And so we were really thinking about what are the best things that the internet could offer. Like maybe I could watch it whenever I want, and I could like pause and go to the bathroom or watch it multiple times and have a deeper understanding. And along with that, we were thinking about like, is there, you know, this idea of like virtual and email, is there a way to add like touch to it? And that kind of mail being the foil to email, they became like a nice kind of a conversation where like the visual art comes in the mail and the film and the music comes in an email, and you kind of see how the conversation merges in your home.
Cool. Yeah, like a new way of yeah, that's cool. I like it.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool. Well, thank you for everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for my first Instagram Live.
You're welcome. All right. Well, thanks again so much, and have a great rest of your week. Happy Monday, and have a good rest of your week.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.